8-bit joystick.
ModRetro is bringing back cartridges. They are publishing newly developed Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, manufacturing actual cartridges and selling them in stores. In addition to making the Chromatic a pretty darn good FPGA Game Boy compatible system, they are making a new line of games on cartridges. These titles not only work on the Chromatic, but they also work on anything that can play Game Boy Color. So that includes the Nintendo Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, the Analog Pocket, and the FPGBC. ModRetro sent me all 6 launch titles, but this is my review. Now, on to the games. Tales of Monsterland DX
is a truly lovely game. It is a side-scrolling platform game, but instead of invoking Super Mario Bros., it takes inspiration from Wonder Boy 3 and Alex Kidd. It definitely plays like a running and jumping platform game, but you pick up a sword which you can use to smack bad guys, and there's also a really strong sense of momentum that you need to control to pull off some really tight jumping. There's also a good amount of light RPG elements, and you can collect coins and spend them in shops and buy healing potions and such. In your quest, you will encounter various magical potions which give you the ability to change form into a werewolf, a mermaid, and others. You can actually swap between these forms on the fly. Did I mention that it's influenced by Wonder Boy 3? Because that sounds an awful lot like Wonder Boy 3, and that's not a bad thing. You play a gender non-specific hero child who finds themselves in a small isolated village, and the rope bridge to get home has been destroyed. And so you need to go out into the monster-filled countryside and power up to confront a wizard who lives atop a giant tower who's probably behind the whole situation. Monsterland breaks it into sort of a Metroidvania-type layout, but it's mostly linear once the branching starts. Once you get certain power-ups, you can get through the obstacles that you find, and this rewards you for playing through the same areas again and backtracking. And there's also a ton of hidden items to find. The platforming controls are very tight, and your character is very light and has a very high vertical leap, but a lot of the challenge comes from jumping between the platforms in the air. You have a heart meter, and when you fall, you lose a heart or get hit by the baddies. However, when it's exhausted, you have to use a continue, and there's only 2 continues. You can save your game at almost any point, but you're probably not going to make it through the game the first time, but the following playthroughs are going to be a lot easier. The studio behind this hired a chiptune composer, and the music really pushes the Game Boy to the limit. I think it's fascinating that since the Game Boy has been popular in making chiptunes for over 2 decades now, some of the modern indie games being made for the Game Boy has better music than a lot of the original run Game Boy games. The graphics are colorful, the animation is fast, and you can clearly see the influence of a lot of retro gaming's greats. But it doesn't really feel derivative of any one particular source. It's actually really refreshing to see a modern-made retro platforming game that's actually made for classic retro hardware instead of the Xbox, Switch, and PlayStation. You will definitely get a lot more out of the experience of playing this game by playing it on a handheld system like the Chromatic. This is a real gem, and I wouldn't be surprised to see if they sell a lot of copies of it, because it is one of the best newly developed Game Boy games in a very long time, and it can absolutely stand on its own next to all the Game Boy Color games published by Nintendo. I wholeheartedly encourage you to buy a copy of this game on cartridge and to support the developers and their future projects. When I was playing this game, I had to wonder, what is a retro game? It's a new game that is made in an old style, and this game takes a variety of excellent influences and puts together a quite lovely recipe that was clearly made by developers that care.
Let me tell you a story.
I know that it's 2025, but playing Tales of Monsterland DX transports you mentally back and emotionally to a very warm, cozy era retro games. This game is best summed up as a chef's kiss. Mwah.
Dragonyhm. I think that's how you say it. Dragonyhm by Spacebot Interactive is an absolute joy to play and behold. It is a fusion of a traditional turn-based Japanese-style role-playing game and The Legend of Zelda with exploration, puzzle solving, and turn-based combat. It is quite impressive that it was made by just 2 people, one of which is the head of games publishing for ModRetro. It is not their first project, and the experience shows. The overworld graphics and the world definitely takes inspiration from Pokemon and The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX, and it has a lush interactive village with a variety of well-written characters and a variety of personalities that will talk to you. You also end up doing a variety of tasks for them and picking up and trading items and getting items in turn, which then help you make progress in your quest. Link's Awakening is a truly great place to take inspiration from. Not just because it's an influential part in the series, but it's also portable Game Boy nature. Dungeons are full of exploration and fun puzzles that tickle the brain at first before ramping up the puzzle challenge. There are 9 main dungeons and a couple mini smaller dungeons. Now, the combat in this game is 100% turn-based JRPG strategic combat, which I love. You see the bad guys on the screen, and you can either try to avoid them, such as Blue Dragon, or run at them and take them on. The other big inspiration for this game is clearly Dragon Warrior / Dragon Quest, most notably the first one. Rather than having a big party of characters, you're just one dude who's both really good at combat and casting spells, and you're out to stop a bad guy who's trying to unleash dragons, but it's mainly a solitary endeavor. However, the real reward is the people that you meet along the way, not to be a little too trite. But the characters and their motivations and the dialogue are really, really well written and genuinely put a smile on my face. The layout and world building seems really, really like a cozy place with cozy charm. Likewise, the character designs had hints of the work of Akira Toriyama on Dragon Quest. All of this comes across honestly, and the inspiration really does not come across as derivative. Now, in the time since this game was first published, I did hear of some people having some technical issues playing this game on an analog pocket with it crashing, but I actually played it almost 100% of the time on my analog pocket, and I didn't run into any issues. The level of polish and the fun in this game is hard to put into words. It is truly a gem. I actually really hope that they do a Japanese localization of this game, and I could see this game being sold in shops in Akihabara, as well as your local GameStop. Dragonyhm, again, that's how I think it's pronounced, is a well-done love letter to classic Game Boy RPGs and adventure games. After I am done with this video, I'm going to come back and play this game until the end, and then I'm probably gonna smile and contemplate doing it again in the future to see the other endings and enjoy it all over again.
Toki Tori Ultimate Edition.
Toki Tori is a very well-made puzzle platforming game, and this Ultimate Edition is an updated upgrade to an already very fun Game Boy Color game. It is made by Two Tribes, a small Dutch development team of 2 developers who coded it in Game Boy assembly. The hand-coded game results in some pretty impressive graphical feats for the Game Boy Color hardware, with large scrolling levels and water transparency. It feels like a very tight modern Game Boy Color game because, in fact, the original Toki Tori was one of the last official Nintendo releases for the Game Boy Color. This updated version was made for the Chromatic, but works in anything that can play Game Boy Color, and it has faster movement and auto jump and the removal of a timer mechanic, resulting in some pleasant quality of life improvements. You play a flightless bird who traverses a series of ladders and puzzles to collect all of the captured eggs on the level. You start each level with a strategic amount of items that you can use to freeze enemies, teleport yourself, build a small bridge, and lift and move bricks. There are a total of 60 levels across 4 different worlds. This is a puzzle game where you are given the bare minimum amount of tools that you need to make progression through the levels, and you have to give it a lot of thoughts to solve each level. It can take a while to come up with the best solution, and this is one of those games that makes you feel very, very smart when you use your noodle and big old brain to solve all the puzzles. Death and failure comes quickly. However, each level starts relatively short, and each stage gets longer and more complex. You are introduced to new tools and techniques with a very pleasant level of progression. As the levels get more difficult, you need to take different approaches to them and also take notes, mental or otherwise. Often, you need to make multiple tracks through the level and solve different things at different times in different orders. It is clearly influenced by strategic puzzle platforming games such as Lemmings, The Adventures of Lolo, but probably the game that influenced it the most is Toki Penguin Land, which goes all the way back to the Sega SG-1000, the Master System, and later the Game Boy. Another bird game that comes to mind is Binary Land, another strategic game involving birds. The animation is quite good, as are the sound effects and the music. This is a deliciously retro game that very much feels like a lost classic game that you're discovering for the first time.
It absolutely feels like something that could have been made in the late 1980s and would be a very appropriate game to enjoy on the Game Boy Color. Patchy Matchy Puzzle Surfing.
This is a fast-paced puzzle game that was made by Malamute that starts off simply but gets challenging and keeps it fun. Apparently, you play as a surfing dog, and there are one of 4 shell-shaped puzzle pieces that dropped in from the top, and you click on one and slide it around horizontally or vertically. If you make 4 or more in a row, they pop and the tiles on top of them slide down. Once you give it some thought, you can plan some combos and have your pieces slide into place and take down multiple ones at the same time. The rate that the shells come down gets faster over time, and also occasionally there's some immovable bubbles that you can only get rid of if you pop the surrounding shells. Once you get the hang of it, you can get into the zone and try to delay the inevitable wipeout when there's too much puzzle pieces that threaten to push you over the top. But at least you're given a courtesy warning to avoid the imminent disaster. There's no multiplayer, but just playing against the computer delivers a pretty good challenge. This game definitely brought to mind matching puzzle games like Puyo Puyo, Yoshi's Cookie, and Wario's Woods. Patchy Matchy changes around the puzzle game genre because instead of just looking at one piece and trying to figure out where you're going to put it, you can actually move around all of the existing pieces on the board, so you're constantly scanning your eyes and rearranging the existing pieces in the best way for you. Now, this is a Game Boy game, not a Game Boy Color game. I'm sort of surprised that they didn't make a DX mode to take advantage of all the colors that the Chromatic can crank out. But even without color, the animation was pretty fluid and smooth, and you can still figure out just what the heck was going on. So ModRetro isn't content enough to just have a new version of Tetris. They're also bringing out new puzzle games to the world of Game Boy.
It's fascinating because a game like this would absolutely fit in during the initial run of the Game Boy Color, but perhaps publishers would have been a little concerned that it's a little too old-fashioned. Well, that old-fashioned has aged a heck of a lot better, and the Game Boy platform is perfect to pick up and play some puzzle games like Patchy Matchy. Traumatarium Penitent.
This is a visually impressive first-person, move-by-move, dungeon-crawling Western-style RPG by Eligos that has you manage your meager resources to see how long you can survive. Apparently, you are a Lady Holy Knight who is sent to a village to quash a rebellion and set things right with the citizenry. I'm not really certain if this particular Holy Knight is the best suited for the job because she seems constantly on the verge of starving to death easily and frequently. Constantly have to juggle your vitality, endurance points, and hit points. And just walking from one screen to the other is enough to delete a vitality point. And once they run out, each move takes one hit point. Before I wrapped my head around the gameplay mechanic, I was puzzled as to why my character kept randomly dying suddenly just from walking around. Apparently, there are 3 dungeons to explore, but you have to make some maps and take notes because just walking around is enough to drive you to death through exhaustion. I mean, I get the fact that Soulsborne games are popular and very, very difficult RPGs are all the rage these days, and this is definitely in that vein. It is a pretty big divergence from all the super chill, laid-back vibes of Dragon Quest. This game is deliberately hardcore and tough as nails, and I'm not saying that it's bad, I'm just saying that you should expect it like that. I kept having From Software flashbacks. The graphics in this game are absolutely amazing, and it pushes the Game Boy hardware as far as it will go. I'm actually really impressed with the constant near 16-bit artwork. The combat in this game is nice and turn-based, and the music is moody and well done. Seriously, your management of food and resources is a major obstacle in this game, and you're at greater risk of starvation and death in this game than you ever would from playing the Oregon Trail. I could see the advantage of playing this game and taking notes and maybe drawing a map and then using it for future playthroughs. I can definitely see the attraction towards making progress in this game, and your success really comes down with a big hit of dopamine. But if you can actually beat this game, I tip my hat to you. This is a gotta get good hardcore RPG for hardcore RPG fans.
Into the Dark 2.
This is a follow-up to a puzzle-based adventure game by Parasitic Game and Gumpy Faction. And you play a sci-fi captain on a spaceship who was sent into an intergalactic emergency, and you defeated a super virus in the previous game at the cost of the life of your cybernetic compatriot. Luckily, there's a well-done cutscene that explains all of this at the start of the game, and that's good for those of you like me who did not play the original. So this is a direct continuation of the story, and you are tasked with tracking down the madman, bad guy, mad scientist who made the evil computer virus in the first place. Now that's the premise, and the actual gameplay has you move your character around like a point-and-click Sierra game, which I was excited to see. And you go to alien worlds, and then you sit down, and rather than exploring, you encounter these computer terminals which contain logic puzzles. And I hope you like puzzle-flipping logic puzzles, because by God, that's the core element of the gameplay in this game. In these puzzles, you are given switches in a grid, and you have to basically turn off all the lights. And the way that you do that is you are presented with a 5 or 4 panel cross, and you click on the tile and that turns it off. But likewise, if a part of the tile is off, then it will turn on. So it's a series of spatial logic puzzles, trying to figure out the best way to flip all the pieces that you need to do in the lowest number of moves of the game, and it actually lets you know if you got a perfect score, and it will let you know if the number of moves that you made that were over par. Luckily, there's no timer, and you can try over and over again to better your score if you're into that kind of thing. I probably put a couple hours into the game, and so far I've only found one kind of logic puzzle like this. And you literally go down to an alien planet, land the ship, find a computer terminal, and then you have to get through 30 or so logic puzzles that are all slight variations against each other, but are basically the same. And then you get to advance enough of the plot, and you get to go to another planet where you land the ship, and then you find another terminal, which is right next to the ship, and the entire process starts over again. Now you also have another compatriot which is inside the ship, and you can talk to them and he will show you a spaceship shooter stage that you could train for when they actually happen. So I don't know if I'm throwing in the towel a little early before writing and filming this review, but I'm sort of taken back by the lack of variety in these puzzles. The moody cyberpunk graphics and the music and the atmosphere is quite good. Now, there seems to be some pretty good writing and a continuation of an already pretty good story. And there might be some good stuff there once you're able to advance the plot a little bit more. But my motivation slowly hit the wall and I had 5 other games to review. I'm cautiously optimistic that there are some good games to be had in there, but it's a little rough at the start of a game with a ton of very similar mandatory puzzles. I really got a lot of mid-90s floppy disk cyberpunk PC game vibes from Into the Dark 2, and that's a good thing. I really look forward to seeing other folks getting their hands on this game and seeing what's in there.
Hey, thank you very much for watching this video, and it would really help out if you would subscribe to this channel because I'm doing my best to make awesome videos like this each week. Also, tell the YouTube robot overlords that you like this video by hitting that like button. Thanks for watching. This is 8-Bit Joystick. Stay awesome. Play retro.